All right, guys, welcome back. This is Interrupting Sports, episode 5 of our season 2. And this week, I'm so excited. You guys are going to be hyped up for this episode because with me today, I have Alanna Hernandez, and she is someone who I was so grateful to connect with a few months ago. You guys are going to have a great time hearing what she has to say in this landscape when it comes to D&I in sport. So I hope you guys are all excited to dive into this. Alanna, say hi.
Hi, so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. No, we are so grateful to have you here today. Before we dive into some questions, would love to just understand why you agreed to be part of this podcast and why you're happy to be here in this interview.
That's easy. So our first conversation was a few months ago, and I was like thoroughly impressed with just talking to you and everything that you're doing. You're still a student. I mean, this generation is just so far beyond where I was at your age. And so anytime I can sort of speak to somebody that is really trying to make a difference and is really interested in making the world a better place through the lens of sports at that, because that's what I'm doing day-to-day basis, I'm all for it. So that's the main reason why I'm here.
Love that. No, we're so grateful to have you. So thank you. I really do appreciate it. Let's dive right in. Let's lay it on the table. Let's talk about your journey through sports. How'd you end up where you are? Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's sort of a very windy path. When I was a kid, I loved sports. I didn't actually ever play sports. I did a lot of like indoor activities, music, dance class, although dancers are athletes. Let's just leave that there. um, but I never played sports, but I was a big fan. I mean, in my house, it was like if you were a Los Angeles team, we were going to root for you. So USC, UCLA, Clippers, Lakers, Angels, Dodgers, you have it. We were rooting for you. And so I grew up just sort of loving the games and loving to be a fan. And that was it. I mean, I didn't know that there was this business of sports and that people could work in it and that women at that could work in businesses dominated by men. That was not something that I saw. I wasn't introduced to that. So that wasn't even on my radar. And I went to law school, wanted to just do something where I could be helping people and working with impoverished communities and whatnot. And didn't realize that sports was a thing that you could do as a lawyer. It wasn't until a few years after I started practicing law as a civil litigator that I realized that this is something that is out there, and lawyers are incredibly instrumental in just making sure athletes are protected. And a lot of the athletes we know come from low income households, one parent households, especially in NBA, football. A lot of people are not growing up with a ton of money. And so having somebody there to look after them, that was something that I thought was really interesting and sort of combined multiple interests that I had together. And I started sort of figuring out how can I get into this, asked a bunch of questions, met some people, and the opportunity at Wasserman just sort of appeared one day, to be frank. And I didn't have any experience doing legal work in sports, but I had experience doing a lot of other legal stuff. And I think I sort of explained that, listen, at the end of the day, you want somebody who is going to have your company and your client's best interest at heart. That's me. I care about people. The reason why I work hard is because I really want to do the best job for whoever I'm working for. That's it, plain and simple. And I've been at Wasserman ever since. I mean, I think I try to tell people who ask me like, oh, how do you get into sports? It's like, well, you have to have your ear to the ground. You have to be really interested, and you just have to work hard to get here, and not necessarily in sports work hard. You don't have to have all the connections in the world, but just be a hard worker, be creative, be a strategic thinker, and be a good person, because that goes a long way. Like, people want to work with good people. So that's how I ended up here, and I've been at Wasserman for 8.5 years now. It's been great.
That's amazing. I absolutely love that. I like your ear to the ground mentality. That's something that I'll kind of take to heart. You hear the lingo that goes, that goes across, like, like it's not enough to be a sports fan. You gotta like put yourself out there, networking, yada yada yada, all the language that's out there, but ear to the ground, that's the next one that's up and coming.
Yeah, and I mean that stuff is hard. Like networking is not like does not come naturally for me. I love having conversations with people and I really like meeting new people, but doing it organically is really how it works well for me. To do it for the purpose of trying to find a job and all of that is difficult.
Mhm.
And it doesn't come natural for everybody, but just, making these connections, you and I now have a connection. And so, your resume comes up or I hear something that I think might be interesting for you, I'm going to reach out to you. And that's the way that like it should be for us to try to pay it forward to get more people who look like you and me into this work.
No, exactly. And I think that's really the point. Like that's why we're having this conversation in the first place, right? It's really understanding why is this conversation even needed in the first place.
Mhm.
That's what I think about it. Like the fact that we even have to have any type of podcast about this says a lot, no matter what we're saying. But even going there, let's dive into more about that of having these conversations and our role of, as you said, paying it forward. So I'm curious as to, for you personally, like what is that personal mission that you have when it relates to promoting this diversity and inclusion?
Um, I mean, it's multifaceted, especially being a woman of color in a very male dominated atmosphere, I think comes with a lot of responsibility. And I don't say that to mean like it's really hard work and, it's like a weight on my shoulders. I don't say it to mean that. It just is, there is a lot that I think that those of us who have gone through the ranks and sort of been in the business for a few years can and should do to try to elevate other people to make the path easier for them. And so the mission is really like, it shouldn't be hard for every single person who is a person of color or every single woman who wants to be in the business of sports to make it. Like it shouldn't be a challenge the way that it continues to be a challenge. It should be that we're picking the best people, we're giving access and opportunities, we're making sure that people like me who didn't know that this was even a thing know that it's a thing and that they can start seeking out those opportunities earlier. I think we all have a responsibility to do that. I mean, it makes me really sad when I hear people say, oh, well, it was hard for me. So, it is what it is. Like everybody's just going to have to work hard and figure it out for themselves. Like that's not the point. I mean, when we have kids, we always say we want things to be easier for our kids than they were for us. So why not do that for the next generation? So that's the way that I look at it. I mean, I love talking to young people about what they're interested in and how they can get there and just being a resource. I mean, that doesn't mean that I'm able to get every single person that I talk to a job someplace, but at least being a resource, I think is huge because so many of us didn't have that when we were very young. And I think that just is what we should be doing in terms of trying to get people that are young into the business that otherwise wouldn't figure it out.
There's a lot of takeaways there. As you could see, I was like, yes, okay, as I was writing it down. I know you guys listening might not be watching us on YouTube, but as that question was being answered, Alanna really got me thinking. I got some wheels turning there. So absolutely love that. One thing that really stood out to me there was when you said be a resource, because I often get the question, people coming to me as allies or even just members of the BIPOC community, and they want to understand like, okay, like what can I do? And it's really as simple as just be you, because you yourself and your experiences have so much to offer to other people because you see the world differently. And doesn't matter if you're talking to someone of a different race, it doesn't have to go that way. Or just
Mm-hmm.
because you are Black doesn't mean you have a responsibility to only help Black people. That's not how this
Right.
works. Right.
No.
It's just understanding that you are an asset and everybody is, right? So being a resource, I think that's a nice key way of putting of just leading and being a difference maker, and leading by example is really what comes to me when you say that. So I hope that's along the lines of what you were trying to get at.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think it has to be as, as complicated as sometimes we're making it seem. Like, it doesn't have to be this very structured, I'm a mentor, you're my mentee, and this is when we talk. Like, it doesn't have to be like that. I mean, there are plenty of people that reach out over LinkedIn and I just kind of give them advice on one phone call, and maybe I hear from them again and maybe I don't hear from them for a few years. But either way, I don't think there's any reason why we can't just, like I said, be a resource and help out and provide information. I mean, there's so many things that I feel like would have been easier had I known, or had somebody been willing to give me advice on just career development and how I should be planning my career. And it's great when it is somebody who otherwise doesn't have those opportunities, because I don't have the connections that a lot of, people that are not of color might have, who grow up in more affluent communities. And so that's great when I can be a resource to people like that. But it really, like you said, it doesn't have to be somebody who looks like me that I'm providing help to.
100%. I love that. Okay, let's dive into your professional career. Let's understand here. I'm really curious as to sort of the challenges that either you've faced or you've seen others face in the landscape that you're a part of, whether that's related to professional career development, being a member of the BIPOC community, whatever you want to touch on.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, I think I've had, thankfully, a few people along the way who've really been instrumental in my career development. And not, one of them is a white male and doesn't look like me, doesn't have the same experience as I had. And one of them is a white female. And again, is a woman, but also doesn't have the same total experience that I've had, and understanding where I'm coming from. But I think it's important to have people who have your back. Like, that is huge, no matter what you're doing, because I think you go through a lot of, as you're sort of trying to figure out your career path, you go through a lot of doubt sometimes. And can I really do this? Is this something that's too challenging for me? Should I go out of my comfort zone and take these risks? And oftentimes you need people to kind of put you in your place and say, yes, you are the person for this job. This is something that's different, but I think you'd be great at it. And it doesn't have to come from somebody who is completely understands your own lived experience. I mean, the important point is to have, I think it's, allies and advocates, mentors all over the board. You need to have people that are in your corner. And I've thankfully been able to have that. And I'm hoping to be able to do that for other people. And it doesn't matter what role you're in. Like, if you're a player, you need a coach to be that person for you, to really tell you that you can push past your limits to be the best athlete that you could be. I mean, we all need that encouragement. And thankfully, I've been able to have that experience so that I could develop and learn and take risks in what I'm doing.
No, 100%. I think understanding that as much as we have a responsibility to help those around us, we are also deserving of that help. And just understanding that you don't have to go through it alone. Not even that you don't have to, you shouldn't. Why?
Right.
why do that when there's people who want to help you and who take that load off you, and just putting yourself in a better position to succeed all around, right? I think our conversation already goes to show that there's more than enough people already wanting to help. And I think it's just, I'm an optimist, so I will say that, but I will say it's more that these people have trouble finding each other, and
Yes.
having conversations like this and having other types of content and other assets out there that people realize, hey, like, this conversation is happening. This is where you need to go. This is what you need to look for. This is what you need to do to take those steps to make sure everyone's in a better place.
Yeah. And to one thing that you mentioned earlier with, like, people don't have to look like you, or to have that sort of, and that's the point, is when you're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you want people from all different spaces to be in the same place. And I think that we gravitate sometimes to what is in our comfort zone, and we're stifling ourselves when we do that. We don't get the best out of ourselves when we do that. And to what you were saying before, just be yourself. I think when you are yourself, you establish these relationships so much easier than when you're trying to be who you think that person wants you to be, or to say what you think the people in the room want you to say. I think now we're at that point in life where, to the point about you being an optimist, I mean, I think I try to be that as well, where people want differences to shine. And so if we're not like broadcasting our differences and the things that that make us unique, and the reasons why we are in the places that we are, then I think we're doing everybody a disservice. And I don't think you get to meet people that are different than you, that are interesting, that teach you stuff, if we don't do that.
I agree. I think it's understanding that you're right. Diversity comes in all forms. And I know we gravitate to talking about Black people because that is who we're talking about in this conversation. It's at the forefront, of course, but it's not the only conversation that comes in. You know, I think sometimes we as in honestly everyone, myself included, when you're automatically thinking of diversity and inclusion, you're automatically thinking of the BIPOC community, right?
Yeah.
And that's great, but that doesn't mean that we should overlook others. And not for the sake, just because of that's helping them out, right? It's equity all around, but it's also for your own sake to expose yourself to a variety of people, like you said, because you're not really going to get there if you're staying in that comfort zone, in that like safe space where, you know, you're not really challenging yourself. So nothing's really going to change.
Yeah. And I think one thing that, like, working in like the DE&I space, DE&I Council at Wasserman specifically, it's like, I'm educated every single day. And I love that. I love that. Like, I mean, none of us are an expert on anything. I mean, we all have a little bit to learn, at least about one thing or another. And so being able to be educated about communities that I'm not familiar with, I think is great. And I think it's like, that's what everybody should be looking for. Like, please educate me and tell me where I can go to educate myself on the issues that the Native American community faces. I mean, we're in Native American Heritage Month. Like, what are the issues that they're facing, and how can I be an ally for them? And the hope is that we all feel that about each other. And, you know, that's ideal, I guess. But that's what it is. Like, we have to continue to be learning. Like, there is not going to be a day where we all just know everything that there is to know and can sort of like sit back and make sure that everybody else is learning because we're good. Like, that's not going to happen. We have to keep pushing forward.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. One thing that you mentioned at the very end, the continuous learning, is a big one. I think maybe this is a misconception that I just see myself. It's that, I don't know, people think there's a point at which you're just going to get there. And when you're there, you're done. But I think it's understanding that, no, when you're there, you're a lot better than where you were before, but there's no end. It's a continuous process of growing, right? And that's in all respects. So I really love that you mentioned that. I'm really curious as to if you could dive a little bit more into your work in the D&I space with Wasserman and what you guys have been up to there.
Oh man, we've been up to a lot. Like, our council started summer of 2019, and then we really got rolling probably early 2020. And I want to say, like, the pandemic, I think, brought all of this to the forefront and made what we do more than just, hey, we volunteer on this committee and this is what we're going to put on a few different events a year. Like, no, this is a day-to-day thing that we are working on. We now have 2 full-time employees who are in the DE&I space, and that's sort of evolved out of the fact that there was a lot of work for us to be doing here. But really, like, we've been able to do so many, like, bring so many people in to have panels and educate employees on it's Black History Month, and I think last year, or I'm sorry, February earlier this year, we focused a lot on like Black representation in the media and intersectionality. Like, what are the challenges facing Blacks in the LGBTQ community? Like, that's different than the challenges just facing that Black straight males face. Like, how can we bring all of this stuff to the fore? So we do that for every single month, that, an awareness month. And then we're focused a lot on mental health. We've done several mental health panels where we've had clients come in and talk about stuff, executives in the company talk about their own mental health struggles. And I think things like that, and just allowing people to get in a room and have a conversation. And a lot of times we'll have these panels and we'll do like small breakout rooms so that it's, 10, 15 people max. So it doesn't feel overwhelming in a group of 300 people, to sort of talk about the challenges you're facing, or the things you just learned and are just starting to understand, and things you want to get more information about. And it's been awesome. Like, that is one of the most rewarding things about the job, is just being able to be in that, learn myself every single day, and then also help to educate other people where I can. It's been great. I can go on and on about that.
No, that's amazing. So what would you say is like the key, if you were to sum it up in a sentence or two, the key focus of that council?
Education of our employees, education of our clients, and making sure that what we're doing in the community reflects the values that we hold as a company.
I love that, especially that last one there. Education goes a long way, but I had a previous conversation in our second episode, actually, when I was very grateful to have one of my profs on the show with us, Numan Ashraf. Awesome. And we actually talked about representing community and how using symbolism through organizations, through sports teams, athletes, and how their position of power, whether they think they have one or not, has to be representative of the community that they serve. So definitely love that, seeing that translates south of the border for me, understanding that goes forward and seeing that change being pushed through. So that's great. I also love the external focus, because personally, what I found just as I'm doing my research on organizations and trying to see what change is being made, there's tons of internal focus, as we love. You often hear diversity hiring, mandatory training, which are all great things, but also understanding that, it goes both ways, understanding your client, who your clients are, and how you can better serve them once it comes to looking at it from this lens is also equally important, right?
Yeah. And I mean, we work with brand clients and athletes on the talent management side, and it's educating brands on what your campaigns can and should look like as it relates to DE&I, and what are the focuses what are the things you need to be focusing on in order to appear and be more relevant. Like, you can't just put out a statement on Instagram and then the way that you operate your company doesn't back that up. You can't just, educating our talent, like you shouldn't just be in the limelight and the forefront without having a voice on something. And if you do want to have a voice, these are the things that you can say, and this is what's going on. How can we help you craft, what it is that you want to say? And so, yeah, I mean, it's great to just try to make sure everybody that we work with feels like they are being authentic, that they're not just taking advantage of the moment because it's the cool thing to do, to talk about DE&I, but really, how do we live that, and how do we make sure that people understand that this is important to us? So yeah, it's something we take really seriously.
100%. And I love that. I love how you articulated that. Everything's well said. Like, I have no further comments to add. Like, it was just authenticity is really the key word that got me, because I agree, when you have buzzwords, you have the latest fad or trend going along, that's what businesses want to, hop onto. And you really hope that comes from a place that is authentic and genuine. It's good to see that there's a focus with that at Wasserman.
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. So just as a last final question, I'm very curious as to if you ever imagined yourself having such a contributory role to the D&I space going forward, or maybe growing up, did you ever think you were going to have such an active role?
Never. I mean, I knew that this was like a thing when I was working at a law firm. We had, and that's the firm still has somebody who is oversees, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I didn't think that this was something that, as an employee is not being paid to be be in the DE&I space, I didn't think that that was something that I could really contribute to and have a voice in. And so I never really thought about it. When the opportunity came up for people to apply, I was a little nervous to apply because, it's such a big responsibility to craft sort of what we want to do with this at the company. But it was like the most exciting thing. And I knew that I couldn't pass it up. So never did I think that this would be an opportunity, but I'm so glad that I've had it. And even if I don't stay as like a super active member on the council, because we want to make sure that other people in the company have the opportunity to sit on the council, I am still going to be, a resource no matter what. Like, this is something that is very near and dear to my heart and goes back towards what I wanted to do when I initially was just thinking about my career, which is helping people that, don't have a voice for themselves. And so this fits right into, my goal in terms of what I thought I wanted to do as a career, not knowing that it would be in sports. But this is not something I'm ever going to kind of cast by the wayside. It's staying for good.
I love that. I'm so happy you're able to find that space and realize that you have so much to contribute to the space. So what would you say let's talk to the people who maybe are in that position that you were in and understand the significance of the events that are transpiring, this culture movement. They understand they have a role, but maybe are timid or don't feel like they have anything to contribute. What do you have to say to them?
Oh man, you have to step outside of your comfort zone. Like, there is no way that you grow as a person or can help the world and the community grow and change unless we get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like, you have to take risks. You have to know that there is something inside of you that other people need to hear, and just go with it. Like, unless you do it, you're going to regret it. Like, you're never going to be sort of satisfied with the fact that you just kind of sat on the sidelines. Like, everybody should be involved in this in some way, shape, or form. And even if that's just, I'm going to have a conversation with my family that I didn't think I'd be able to have before. It doesn't have to be like a public thing on, social media. It could really just be, I'm having conversations and educating people and making sure that we're all trying to better understand what's going on. You got to take the risk. There's no reward without the risk.
Amazing. I completely agree. I would say the same thing for even this podcast. I can't tell you that I wasn't nervous starting this. Definitely.
Right.
Was. But I'm so grateful for having these types of conversations. And, even though it's an uncomfortable space, you become more comfortable as you get more experience and you continue paving the way. So great to hear those answers. Yeah. I had a phenomenal time with you in this interview. I want to thank you again so much, Alanna, for joining me on this.
I know our listeners went by so fast.
Yeah.
Like, we're done already.
Already. Awesome. Wrapping it up. But just wanted to end it there. So guys, you know where to hit us up. Interrupting Sports on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. Shout out to Alanna again for this. I'll drop her in the ad so you'll be able to look her up. But we'll see you guys next week.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Of course.